Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Arundhati Ramnan and here are the headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. Stock markets end with minor gains after financial stocks recover in late trade. Sensex gains over 120 points. Nifty moves back above 18,200 levels. The government amends rules for minimum shareholding of listed public sector enterprises, expands the scope to allow them exemption for specified periods. The exemption will remain valid even if the PSU is divested.
I get excited about sort of even the unique things that are happening in India using the cloud, and that's really definitely a real departure from the previous era.
Satya Nadella says that he is excited about the cloud adoption in India, highlights that the unique things happening in India is a departure from the previous era, says India has the potential to lead in the cloud plus artificial intelligence era. CBI expands the ambit of its investigation in the ICICI Bank Videocon loan case. Sources say that the agency is now investigating 10 more high-value loans that were disbursed to Videocon Group by ICICI Bank between 2012 and 2016. Suhail Samir quits as the CEO of BharatPe, transitions to the role of a strategic advisor. CFO Nalin Negi appointed as interim chief while the board searches for a new CEO. Sources say Samir had indicated intent to quit as CEO months ago, and the decision was mutually agreed upon with the board. Maruti reports a 28% rise in exports in 2022. The company dispatched a record 2.6 lakh vehicles to over 100 countries last year. The Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion is working on a new industrial policy which will be sent to the cabinet for approval soon. The proposals include more funding for industries through a development finance institution. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh inaugurates crucial infrastructure projects in Arunachal Pradesh. This was his first visit to the state post at Tawang face-off between the Indian Army and Chinese troops last month. Singh said India has every capability to thwart challenges along the border. Five-judge Constitution bench holds that no additional restrictions can be imposed on free speech of ministers and lawmakers, adds that their comments cannot be attributed off the government of the day. Justice Nagaratna, however, says that indiscreet speech is a cause of concern, urges political parties to control their ministers by developing a code of conduct. Those were the headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. Let's start with the day's market action. The Sensex gained over 120 points and the Nifty moved back above the 18,200 mark as stock markets ended the second trading session of 2023 in the green. A late rally in bank stocks aided the recovery on Dalal Street. Mid-cap index also managed to keep their heads above water. Nigel D'Souza is here with all the action from the markets. Nigel, a good day for the markets?
Well, that's right. It was a bit of a range-bound day of trade for the Nifty, but the Nifty Bank did outperform in trade. The Nifty, a couple of times, we tried to get past that 18,250-odd mark, but that was met with resistance. The advanced decline ratio, well, it ended in the positive trend. But if you look at the crisscross lines, by the time we wound up, well, those lines got closer to each other, telling you that the number of advancing stocks, they did move a little bit lower, while the number of declining stocks did increase as the day progressed. Banking updates did come in. And in fact, the sector is looking up. Those smaller banks did come in with a positive update. CSB Bank, Bank of Maharashtra, as well as South Indian Bank, all three of them, the quarterly update was rather good and the stocks did end well in the green. On the flip side, though, MMFSL, well, it appeared that dispersals were pretty good, but it seems the street was a little bit disappointed on that front because that ended down close to around 4% on rather large volumes. Metal stocks, they had a good run yesterday, but from the Nifty pack itself, you had JSW Steel as well as Hindalco. Both of them pulled back a little bit, but they can do little to pull back the Nifty. The problem was Reliance Industries and ITC. For majority of the trading session, they traded in the red, and that prevented the Nifty from moving up. Reliance Industries, well, it had a bit of a headwind today because that tax was revised, and that's why, in fact, it was a bit of a headwind for the company in today's session. Insurance stocks, though, they did well in trade. Remember, they've been the big underperformers in the last year or so, but whether it was life insurance or general insurance stocks, all of them did well. Maybe a positive start to the year when you look at taking insurance, an underpenetrated sector as well, and maybe you're looking at focusing more on your health. So pharma-related stocks, in fact, did pretty well. You had Sun Pharma from the Nifty pack that was up, Strides was up, as well as Granules. All of them did pretty well in trade today. The power sector has been seeing quite a bit of reforms that are taking place. An indirect way of playing it will be via REC and PFC, and both those two did pretty well. So to wind things down, the global markets have started reopening now, and volumes will get back to normal levels. That's what will give direction to the Nifty. But in the near term, 18,350 could be a bit of a technical resistance level.
All right, Nigel, thank you so much for those details. Now, a change in taxes for domestic oil producers and exporters. The government has increased windfall tax on crude petroleum from 1,700 rupees per ton to 2,100 rupees per ton. Similarly, the special additional excise duty on diesel has been hiked from 5 rupees per litre to 6.5 rupees per litre. And the tax on air turbine fuel has also been increased from 1.50 rupees per litre to 4.50 rupees per litre. However, the special additional excise duty on petrol continues to remain unchanged at 0. The revised tax rates will be effective from today. And in a bid to smoothen its strategic divestment process, the government has changed the definition of a government company with respect to the minimum 51% shareholding. Not just that, the government has also eased the 25% minimum public shareholding norm for any listed centre, state or PSU-owned company. Sapna Das joins us now to explain what these changes mean. Sapna, help us understand these tweaks.
Well, on two counts. First, of course, a plain and simple extension for CPSEs and PSBs or any other financial institution wherever the central government directly or indirectly holds any stake, or any centrally controlled CPSE that holds stake, and this could also be a state-level CPSE. So that is one clarification in terms of widening the scope of the clarification. That's one. This is pretty comprehensive in nature. I think the aim here is twofold. A, to help those companies, those CPSEs and PSPs which have not met the 25% minimum public shareholding norm, is to help those companies, and also to further the whole aim of strategic disinvestment. For instance, if a company is privatized, the moment it gets privatized, it changes ownership. The government moves out of that, or at least partially moves out of it. From day one, the minimum public shareholding norms kick in. This particular order that we're talking about, or the change in rules, basically allows those companies this kind of exemption. This dispensation of exemption will continue even for companies which are very close to be privatized or which are going to be privatized. I suppose the best case right now would be IDBI Bank. If you look at the public float of the bank, it's hardly around 6%. Now, to expect IDBI Bank post-privatization to go from 6% to 25% in a short period of time, I think that would be very unfair. So I think this particular change in rules takes care of that as well, and that should be kept in mind. Hence, the Gazette mentions from a point of view of strategic disinvestment. And the other thing, of course, I mentioned, it's a general exemption that's being extended because a lot of CPSEs and PSBs have yet to meet the 25% shareholding norm. There'll be a separate notification giving the actual timeline for which the extension will hold. We're given to understand that probably the government is again mulling on a 2-year extension.
All right, Sapna, thank you for explaining those details to us. Now, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella says that he's excited about the cloud adoption in India, highlights that the unique things happening in India is a departure from the previous era, says India has the potential to lead in the cloud plus artificial intelligence era. Take a look.
And we see tremendous momentum today when it comes to cloud adoption. In fact, when I think about Microsoft, that's been the big, when in the client-server era, we sold a few servers in India. But in the cloud era, it's a completely different ballgame, right? When I look at every business and the cloud consumption, it's tremendous to see. We see Adani choosing Azure for its expansion, HFDC using it, in fact, to consolidate all of the data platforms. And Yes Bank built their super app. So tremendous adoption of cloud. And in fact, the more and more I talk to my partners and customers here, I get excited about sort of even the unique things that are happening in India using the cloud. And that's really definitely a real departure from the previous era.
Meanwhile, Suhail Samir has quit as the CEO of BharatPe. The company said that Samir will step down as CEO and will assume the role of a strategic advisor from January 7th. Meanwhile, CFO Nalin Negi has been appointed as interim chief while the board searches for a new CEO. Ritu Singh joins us now with the latest. Ritu, what's the company's succession plan now?
Well, the spate of exits at BharatPe continue, with the company now announcing that its current CEO Suhail Samir will be stepping down from his position as the CEO effective the 7th of January and transition into his new role as a strategic advisor for the company. And in the meantime, the CFO, which is Nalin Negi, is going to be acting as the interim CEO while the board looks for the next chief executive officer of BharatPe. Now, we've been given to understand that this decision to move on from his CEO position was mutually agreed upon between Suhail Samir and the board of the company. We understand that Suhail had expressed his intent to move on from BharatPe to the board several months ago, and the board also wanted to expedite the search for the next CEO because they knew of this decision in order to stabilize the ship ahead of the IPO, which is planned for 2 years later, and therefore the decision was mutually agreed upon. But that said, Suhail Samir was hired by Ashni Grover, so this will be sort of a clean slate for both the board and for Suhail Samir also to start over in his full-time capacity as an angel investor. Remember, he's already made a few key investments and he wants to take that up as a full-time job. Rajneesh Kumar, the chairman of BharatPe, in his statement acknowledged Suhail Samir's role, and he also said that they recognize the need to dedicate time and resources into finding the next CEO. And Suhail Samir also confirming that he will look forward to the next phase of his journey, which is going to be as a full-time investor.
All right, Ritu, many thanks for those details. Now, the e-auction of the Shrey twins under the IBC kicks off today. There are 3 suitors in the fray. The e-auction will be conducted under a challenger mechanism with a base bid of 4,500 crore rupees in net present value terms. This includes a minimum cash component of 3,000 crore rupees. The Adani Group has decided to pay an additional 48 rupees and 65 paise per share to NDTV shareholders who sold their share under the open offer. With this, shareholders will get around 343 rupees per share, same as what Adani paid to NDTV founders Radhika and Pranoy Roy. Travel and hospitality software service provider RateGain Travel Technologies is all set to acquire US-based data exchange platform Adara Inc. for over 130 crores. RateGain's management said the deal is in line with its vision of wallet share expansion and customer acquisition. On to the latest in the ICICI Bank Videocon loan case. The CBI has expanded the ambit of its investigation. So far, it was only looking at loans disbursed by ICICI to Videocon between 2009 and 2011. But now sources say the CBI will be probing loans sanctioned till 2016. The agency is now investigating 10 more high-value loans that were disbursed by to Videocon Group by ICICI Bank. Santya Gora has the details on this new development. Santya?
Sources privy to CBI investigation and ICICI Videocon loan fraud case have told CNBC-TV18 that CBI has increased the ambit of its investigation. Earlier, CBI was investigating the high-value loans which were sanctioned by ICICI Bank to Videocon Group between 2009 and 2011. But now CBI has found out that between 2012 and 2016 also 10 high-value loans were disbursed by ICICI Bank to Videocon Group, and now CBI has started investigating those 10 high-value loans as well. Sources also told CNBC-TV18 that CBI investigation has revealed that Chanda Kochar never informed the bank about the business relationship between her husband Deepak Kochar and VN Dhoot, and allegedly she never informed the bank about the conflict of interest angle as well, not even when she was a member on those loan sanctioning committees. Apart from that, sources have told CNBC-TV18 that VN Dhoot continues to change his statement, and CBI is yet to get a prosecution sanction from ICICI Bank. What CBI has is an old letter of 2021, but it will need a new sanction, prosecution sanction from the bank. But the bank is yet to entertain this request of CBI.
So that's the latest on the ICICI Bank Videocon loan case. Thank you so much for those details, Santya. Now, the government is working on a new industrial policy that will be replacing the 30-year-old framework that was designed way back in 1991. The draft industrial policy has been circulated by the Commerce Ministry for consultations with other ministries. Abhimanyu Sharma joins us now with the details. Abhimanyu, what are the key highlights of the draft policy?
Well, the draft policy has been circulated with various ministries for consultation. It's also likely to be given to the Union Cabinet for approval sometime later. The key highlights of that include the possibility of a development finance institution which may be established, and also the use of forex reserves for funding. It also asks for an integrated investment promotion strategy as well as performance-based loans and incentives for innovation. DPIIT's proposals also include encouragement to MSMEs to choose the corporate bond market as well as acceptance of IPR as loan collateral. It also mulls at social security schemes for women workers and inclusion of labor-intensive industries under the PLI scheme. So various initiatives which have been suggested and most importantly, it brings in the issue of IPR and innovation as something which may be equated to funding, which may possess monetary value according to the policy which is to be sent to the Union Cabinet for approval. It remains to be seen what are going to be the suggestions which will be given by various ministries as part of the consultation, which of the views will be inculcated in the policy, the ones which will make through as part of the final plan. That is something which is going to decide the contours of the Act and the new rules which will come up in the public domain.
Welcome back. You're still with us on Business 360. The Supreme Court has ruled out imposing additional restrictions on right to free speech by ministers, MPs and MLAs. A 5-judge constitutional bench has ruled that restrictions on free speech are the same for all citizens and cannot go beyond what is prescribed in the Constitution. One judge, Justice Nagaratna, however, raised concerns over indiscreet speeches by lawmakers. Ashmit Kumar joins us now. Ashmit, take us through what the Supreme Court ruling said.
Well, to begin with, the question that was there laid before the Apex Court is that in cases of hate speeches or incendiary speeches by ministers or by senior leaders of the government, what happens then? Do we need some additional restrictions? Do we need some additional safeguards? Well, that question has been answered in the negative by the Apex Court. The Supreme Court is very clear. No additional restrictions can be placed on free speech of ministers, elected leaders, MPs, MLAs. Further, what the court said is that as far as these guidelines and issues are concerned, a mere speech being made by a politician or by a leader or by a public functionary cannot in fact said to be violative of your constitutional rights or my constitutional rights. The third key takeaway from the Apex Court's judgment is that senior ministers and leaders of a government making comments, those comments cannot be attributed to the government. So these are protections that in fact the Supreme Court has now given to various elected leaders, MPs and MLAs. However, what's interesting to note is that just as in the demonetization judgment, Justice B.V. Nagaratna did give a view, an independent view in this matter as well. Now, while she's not opposed to any of these assertions made or the claims that are being made by the Supreme Court, what she does, however, she, through her own rationale, makes very few interesting comments. Number one, the first point that she raises is that as far as hate speech is concerned, it continues to be a major concern, especially it strikes at the heart of an equal society that is sought here in India, which is a multicultural place, and that it is based on principles of harmony and fraternity, and that hate speech damages that. So that's the first key point that she makes. The second key takeaway here from her observations is that especially as far as public leaders are concerned, given the influence that they wield over large masses, it's important that they are more restrained and measured in their conduct, especially as far as their speeches and words are concerned. The third is, and this is quite interesting, and this is a small bit where she's at odds with the majority view, is that disparaging comments being made by a minister can vicariously be attributed to the government of the day. And the fourth takeaway, and this is more of a suggestion coming in from the Apex Court, from Justice B.V. Nagaratna, is that while the Supreme Court is not prescribing any guidelines or restrictions on free speech, that issue is still open for the Parliament to consider, number one. And number two, it is for the political parties to rein in such errant leaders by establishing a code of conduct. So strong words, those by Justice B.V. Nagaratna.
Yeah, some interesting comments there. Thank you so much for those details, Ashmit. Now, the Bombay High Court has pulled up the Maharashtra government in the Johnson & Johnson baby powder case. The court has questioned the state government's delay of over 2 years in taking action against the company for using an outdated testing method for its baby powder product. According to Live Law, the court has directed the state FDA to respond by Friday on whether it wants to consider retesting of the samples. Remember, the Maharashtra FDA had cancelled the license of the company's baby powder in September 2022. The government will be holding a meeting with major players from the auto industry to discuss standards of battery swapping. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that the ministry is likely to discuss the recent standards that were set up by the Bureau of Indian Standards. Danish Anand joins us now with the details. Danish, who are the key players likely to attend this meeting?
With the Consumer Affairs Minister, Piyush Goyal is holding an important meeting with all key stakeholders on the battery swapping standards. According to sources, this meeting is being attended by key players from the two-wheeler industry, three-wheeler industry, battery manufacturers, as well as by those players that have been given a green signal for the ACC PLI scheme. Well, according to sources, this meeting has been called to build a consensus among the industry as far as the battery standards are concerned, because currently the shape, size and form of the battery is a major bone of contention among several players of the auto industry as well as of the battery industry. Hence, this meeting has been called to build a consensus among the industry. Besides this, in this meeting, the government will also be taking a crucial call on whether to make battery swapping voluntary or whether to make it mandatory. And in this meeting, the government is also likely to decide on the timeline along with the industry that what timeline should be given for the implementation of battery standards. But all in all, if we see, this is a very crucial meeting because this will shape the future policy of battery swapping standard, and it will also give us an indication that once battery standards are decided, then what kind of battery will be going into two-wheelers and other the three-wheelers. So all in all, if we see, the Consumer Affairs Minister Piyush Goyal is holding a very crucial meeting on battery swapping standards.
So a crucial meeting there to watch for. Thank you so much for those details, Danish. Now, the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh visited Arunachal Pradesh for the first time since the clash between Indian and Chinese troops in Tawang last month. In his address, he said India has every capability to thwart challenges along the border. He also inaugurated the Siom Bridge in Arunachal along with 27 other crucial BRO infrastructure projects worth more than 720 crore rupees virtually. Russia claimed that 63 of its soldiers died due to an airstrike by Ukraine in the Donetsk on New Year's Day. The Ukrainian military has said that the number of consulates is around hundreds. Ukrainian President Zelensky has said that Russia is planning a protracted campaign of attacks with Iranian drones. NBC's Matt Bradley gets us a special report.
Ukraine's single deadliest attack against Russia in months, using American-supplied HIMARS rockets to level this vocational college that Russia had been using as a barracks for newly recruited troops in the east. Russia's Ministry of Defense saying 63 Russian soldiers died. Earlier today, Ukraine's military said as many as 400 newly recruited Russian soldiers were killed. Still, Russia is firing back, far from the front lines. Kyiv's mayor said air defenses shot down 39 Russian drones that swarmed the capital overnight. At night, I heard a very strong bump, said this man. The furniture even moved. The attacks mostly targeted the power grid, leaving many Ukrainians without heat and electricity in the bitter cold. Russia has launched these attacks since the fall, usually around once a week. But now, they're daily. This was the 5th straight day of bombardments. Do you think that the Russians could run out of missiles, run out of drones?
On the drones, it depends on how many Iran would be able to supply to Russia and how strong Western sanctions would be in reducing that supply. On missiles, now Russians are using their untouched spares.
He credits anti-air weapons provided by the US and Europe for swatting down most of the missiles and drones, helping keep the lights on the home front as this war stretches into the new year. And tonight, Ukraine's President Zelensky warned Ukrainians that Russia is planning another prolonged attack with those Iranian-made drones.
So that's the latest from Ukraine and Russia. Now, ethylene glycol has been named as a cause of death in multiple cases across countries over the years. Recently, it has been named as a contaminant in the cough syrup manufactured by Marion Biotech that allegedly resulted in the death of 18 children in Uzbekistan. So why are companies still using this component and what are the regulations behind it? Ekta Batra gets us more. Ekta?
Thanks for that. Well, yes, ethylene glycol and diethylene glycol are colorless, odorless, sweetish tasting substances which are more used for industrial purposes, ranging from antifreeze formulation to brake fluids to paints, plastics, etc. The pharmaceutical grade can be used for medicines and consumer products in the quantity that is recommended. Remember, the two substances can be toxic if there is any contamination to the pharma grade and if it is consumed beyond recommended levels. In fact, there are safer alternatives to these substances such as glycerine and propylene glycol for drugs. So why is ethylene glycol or DEG then still being used when safer substitutes are available? Factors range from the substance being easily available, has greater solubility, more palatable, i.e. sweeter, hence used for pediatric drugs, and lastly, more cost efficient. The question then arises, which companies use these substances? Do all pharma companies use them? Feedback is that there is no regulation that indicates it should not be used. But based on history, ethylene glycol and DEG should be avoided. Generally, companies with good R&D and manufacturing practices avoid using the component in case it can be substituted. So if pharma companies do use ethylene glycol and DEG, are they required to test these solvents? Yes. Schedule M of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act indicates all raw material needs to be tested for compliance with required standards of quality. Feedback again is many a time smaller companies who cannot afford to test solvents or those with lax manufacturing processes or poor personnel might not comply with the law. In some instances, allegedly, the quality certificate provided by the distributor is used by pharma companies to get approvals. Lastly, what can be done to tackle the problem? Experts say there needs to be tighter regulations and guidelines in place, such as in the Indian Pharmacopoeia. Frequent inspections by regulators and checks and balances to ensure a quality supply chain, and more importantly, these steps need to be enforced. One can also consider factors such as putting out a list of more hazardous substances, such as glycols, on the drugs manufactured. Currently, only the active ingredients need to be listed, which can possibly lead to more informed decisions and probably more accountability.
Right, Ekta. Many thanks for those details. On that note, it is a wrap on this edition of Business 360. Many thanks for watching. Stay tuned to CNBC TV 18. The news and updates continue on the other side.